You know, in the Iroquois Confederacy, in fact, a friend of mine, Lila Connors, who made the movies, the 4 videos that we did with Leonardo DiCaprio on climate change, is working on a project about the Iroquois Confederacy right now, and we've all been learning a lot. And basically, the women voted. It was a matriarchy and matrilineal. I mean, most kind of tribal societies are matrilineal. And in the modern world, I know Judaism is matrilineal. You're Jewish if your mother is Jewish, not your father. I don't know about other religions, frankly. In Christianity, it doesn't matter because that's a declared religion. But I'm also wondering how much of this is just men behaving badly. Does this just go back to this kind of offhand joke that I've been making for years and years? Actually. Here's where I first heard this. A friend of mine who was a professor at the Harvard Medical School, Ned Hallowell, and I were doing. This was back in the 90s when I was writing books on ADD, and we were doing a tour around the country giving speeches on ADD, and he was talking about it from the point of view of a doctor, and I was talking about it from the point of view of a psychotherapist and somebody who was running a community for abused kids, and the author and the guy who invented the hunter-farmer theory. And we were having lunch one day, and we started talking about drug abuse. And I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about cocaine and heroin and what's more addictive and all that. And then suddenly Ned says, "You know what's the most dangerous drug in the world? I mean, you're talking about heroin and all this stuff, but the most dangerous drug in the world, the one that has caused more deaths, the one that has led to more wars, the one that has destroyed more lives, the one that has destroyed more marriages, the one that has destroyed more people, the most dangerous drug in the world is testosterone." And I've used that as kind of a throwaway line ever since. I sometimes attribute it to Ned, and sometimes I forget to. But thank you, Ned, for that, if you're listening. But is this just men behaving badly? And if so, what do we do about it? Did the Iroquois figure something out by saying we're going to reduce the power of men in our society and elevate the power of women? Did that make it not an issue? I honestly don't know. I wasn't around for the Iroquois Confederacy, although they're still here, but their form of government is probably quite different than it was when Ben Franklin famously in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in August or July of 1787 said, it would be an amazing thing if 5 tribes of ignorant savages have been able to forge a bond that has lasted in peace for 1,000 years, and 13 colonies of educated Englishmen can't do the same. I'm paraphrasing, but words to that effect. But in this article in the Washington Post, Catherine Rampell points out female staffers. Now, again, she's talking about women who work on Capitol Hill. Female staffers earn, on average, about $6,000 less annually than their male counterparts. Is that because of this kind of cultural hysteria, this weirdness that we have, that they're actually not allowed to be in the inner sanctum of power, which might involve going out? Remember when Paul Ryan got busted for having dinner with that lobbyist? And, having the 2 $300 bottles of wine, and there was a couple nearby, and I think the woman was a professor, and she took a picture of it and went viral. This was like 4 or 5 years ago. We did a whole day on it on this show. And my recollection is that Paul Ryan had a staffer probably his chief of staff with him. I might be misremembering. He might have just been alone with the lobbyist. But what if the lobbyist had been a woman? What if his chief of staff had been a woman? Would it have ended up on the front page of the National Enquirer instead of on the front page of Think Progress? Would the story, instead of being Paul Ryan gets $600 worth of wine from a lobbyist for dinner, would the headline have been, "Is Paul Ryan sparking with this person?" And what does that say about us? We're seeing a lot of these kind of things, and it seems like a lot of it goes back to men behaving badly, which is not to say that women don't sometimes behave badly too. But case in point, for example, Scott Desjardins, who is the Republican congressman from Tennessee. There's a great little graphic over at DemocraticUnderground.com on this. He publicly opposes abortion. He has repeatedly run for office as a pro-life candidate. Last week, he voted with most other House Republicans for an abortion ban at 20 weeks, a ban. Court transcripts from his divorce reveal that he supported his wife's decision to end 2 pregnancies. He's had several extramarital affairs, one of which involved him getting a 24-year-old woman pregnant and then pressuring her to have an abortion. Wait, really? Yes, really. Okay, so we've got men behaving badly. I have Louise and I have a woman friend. I'm not going to name her for obvious reasons. And this is from more than a decade ago. In fact, this was probably almost 20 years ago. Whose gynecologist was a good-looking young man and ended up basically seducing her. She told us she was kind of surprised and shocked, but ultimately willing to go along, into having sex with him in his office. Now, that's the more soft version of it. The harder version of it is that there have been probably millions of women over the, since around the 14th or 15th century when they started burning midwives at the stake and killing women herbalists, when women could no longer become doctors and only men could be doctors. There have probably been millions of women who have been molested or raped by their doctors. And so now Louise, having gone through breast cancer, she's been in a lot of doctors' offices, a lot of male doctors' offices who are looking at her private parts, and they always have to have a woman in the office with them. What does this say about us as a society? I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I think it's a fine thing. But, do our doctors really need, or is that an argument for getting a hell of a lot more women doctors? And if so, then should we consider something like, for example, one of our kids got a scholarship who's a woman, got a scholarship when she was first going to college to an all-women's college, and she loved it. Didn't have to deal with the men. Could show up at class without makeup. In fact, could show up in her pajamas if she wanted. Is there something to this? That in Saudi Arabia, only women doctors can see women, only men doctors can see men. I don't know the answer. Let's talk about it.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-536-2370.
Whatever the answer is, though, I am convinced that this feeds in a big way into the fact that women make $7 for every $10 a man makes.